Yo, let's see what happens. Go here, library, watch later. I don't actually want to do that.
How cool is this? Even the box. The moment I saw this Soviet era mouse on eBay, I couldn't help myself. I had to hit buy it now. Or at least the closest thing I have to a buy it now button ever since they took away my eBay login, which is justified because I keep doing things like this. But come on! I mean, I've never seen anything like this before. These things just didn't make their way to the West, and I know what you're thinking. Wow, Linus, an old mouse. Maybe it has non-ergonomic buttons and a rubberized ball that I get to install myself, apparently. Cool. I wonder if it's beige. Actually, Captain Obvious, it's more of a light gray. You probably also think that this is a serial port, don't you? I mean, we certainly did, but as we discovered, in order to fulfill our legal obligation of playing Doom on this thing, now that we have it in our hands, it was going to take a lot more than just plugging this into a legacy port on a modern computer. Thanks, Labs team. Meet the Mars UKV-01 Coordinate Input Device. We are going to have a lot of fun with you. And a lot of fun with our sponsor, The Ridge. Win big with The Ridge's Hennessy Sweepstakes. You can get one bonus entry for every dollar spent on Ridge products, or up to 1,000 for every dollar spent on custom products from Hennessy Performance. Use the link below for 10 bonus entries to a chance to win a Hennessy Ford Bronco and more. Even before we get beneath the surface, there's so much to love about this thing. I mean, ball mouse. Huh? Is this what a Soviet hand was shaped like? Also, the clicks are rather unique. See, one of them is clicky, and one of them is mushy. And from what we've seen, that's actually consistent across all of these, I guess. So you could tell which button was which because you're not sure where your fingers are? I mean, if your hand is shaped like this, yeah, maybe you have completely different fingers like I've never seen before. It's BYOB, bring your own ball. It's included in the box, but you do have to install it yourself. I gotta say, the cable, wow, that sucks. In all seriousness, though, other than the age, this is a remarkably well-preserved specimen, and one of only a handful of mice that was produced in Russia in the late 80s and early 90s as the Soviet Union was collapsing. The UKV-01 was better known as the Martian, and while it could be used with several of the different microcomputers that were available at the time, it's best known as the mouse for the BK-0010, the most widely produced Soviet home computer. The BK series was the product of a government-run computer literacy effort, kind of like the BBC Micro in the UK. It had 32 kilobytes of RAM and a 16-bit PDP-11 compatible CPU running at 3 megahertz. Though, apparently you could overclock it to a
Go on, try to stop me.
It's my night to make dinner back home, so let's take our time.
Once less stands to turn, it all spills out.
Introducing your champion.
Your death will come with speed and precision. That is the skill of a pilot.
I'm the jump master. AJ, lead them away.
There's no operating system, just a BIOS and a global interpreter, 32 kilobyte ROM, but you could get a basic interpreter as an upgrade module, which was enough for a huge homebrew community to spring up around this machine, creating and sharing both games and other programs. The Martian, then, was designed to give the BK-0010 and other late Soviet microcomputers more input options, kind of like the older Kolobok did for the Russian IBM PC clones like the PC-1841. It was available in multiple colors and 3 configurations, with 2 including cards to interface with specific computers, and the third, that's the one that we got, which was meant to connect to the UP port of the BK610. This would have cost 150 rubles at the time, which, according to our seller, would work out to about $350 today, which, funnily enough, is actually what we paid for it. Of course, we didn't know any of this stuff before we bought the Martian. We just thought it looked cool. Let's take it for a spin, or a roll. In theory, serial port, surprisingly, is easy enough to find even on modern gaming rigs. The only challenge is that this is obviously not an external serial connector, or we could access the header. Aha! There we go. And yeah, it's never First clue should have been that none of the holes on the connector were keyed, but we thought, who knows, maybe they just wanted to save a penny or a kopeck, as it were, on the connector, and we could just flip it around. No dice there, and before you ask, yes, we verified that the Windows serial mouse driver is installed. So, this is clearly going to be more complicated. But, if at first you don't succeed, hey, there's always the manual. Unfortunately here, my detective skills tell me that this manual is in some kind of foreign language. And while I've got to give them full credit for including not just a nice little drawing of the mouse, but even full electrical schematics, that's so cool, right? This is also in a foreign language. And while a surprising number of folks around here are able to sound out the words from the Cyrillic letters, none of them were sure what any of the words meant, so that doesn't really help us. The good news is that the Russian documentation did point us in the right direction. This part of the schematic right here looks an awful lot like a pinhole. And this diagram in the manual looks like a conversion between 2 different types of connectors. So between the 2 drawings, and knowing that Russian uses a B for a sound, we figured that pin 10 probably wanted +5 volts, and pin 17 was probably ground. Now, both of the drawings show plus and minus X and plus and minus Y, but we figured motion...
There's no way you put that many shots on someone and they'll fucking die.
Straightforward, which and minus X and plus and minus Y, but we figured motion was going to be pretty tricky, and we decided to ignore those and start with the buttons, thinking those would be more straightforward, which we actually were right. KH1 and KH2 are indeed our buttons, which we were able to verify.
I love the fucking diagram, bro. Shit is awesome.
If it's done testing.
I'm ready. Let's get the job done.
I don't make you nervous, do I?
Introducing your champion.
Drop there.
Stand there, scoundrel.
Fly to heaven, this.
You stay in the ring? Gang up on people? No, but seriously, get in the ring, stay in the ring, gang up on people. Lifeline. Lifeline, that's for you. The helmet.
Helmet here. Level 4. Fancy as. We're already inside the next ring. Backpack here. Level 2.
Listen up, I'm getting shot at.
Attention.
First blood. Good thing it's not us.
Lifeline, heal yourself quick.
I can't heal myself inside of this thing.
Yes, you can. Do it.
Oh, really? I'm hitting Q, you dumb shit.
We're in for a fight now.
Okay, so do you not have any syringes?
No, I don't have shit.
That egg shield is cracked. Ladies and gentlemen, we might be a month away from a knockout. On your feet. Got it then. Marvelous news. We're in the next.
High with a multimeter reading high when open and low when closed. So, armed with that knowledge, all we needed to do was figure out how to get the PC to take in those values, what all the other things do, and how motion is recorded. So, Jordan from the writing team got as far as grabbing Arduino from the warehouse before he realized that we have a whole lab full of really smart people who do this kind of thing every day, and handed it off to them. It was at that time that we also started having some luck with our Google searches. We found this post on a Russian language FPGA forum that, if we ran it through Google Translate, gave us a wealth of historical information about The Martian. For instance, it confirmed what we had already figured out about the pinout, and it expanded on that with some additional technical details. We learned, for example, that one of the adapter cards for the mouse pulled it around 50 times a second, and that there was a reset pin, though the reason for the reset pin existing took us some time to figure out. Full credit to the writing team for the effort they put into things, but boy does the lab ever get things done fast. You can see we ditched our Arduino for a Raspberry Pi Pico to translate the Martian input to standard USB HID signals, and they were apparently able to get us to this point in only about half an hour. Here we go. This is my first time getting to do all this. Okay. Click what? Left click, right click. Basically what you're looking at here is the Pico reads the voltage on the 2 pins for the mouse buttons, and then it sees if there's a state change. It will either click or unclick the appropriate button, and then it loops back to reading the buttons. This is a super compute-intensive way of learning into it, but it's working. There might not be a lot of games that we can play with this, but there are at least some. Oh, crap.
Come get some. Move it or die.
Hey, this is really hard. I don't think Flappy Bird was this hard. Look how much he bounces each click. Oh. Of course, we're pretty limited in terms of the kind of games that we can play with only a left and right mouse click. And getting motion working, that's going to take a lot longer than half an hour. And we know which pins it is. It's the plus minus Y and plus minus X. But what does, for example, plus Y indicate? That we moved up in the past? That we are actively moving up right now? Maybe it's not even a simple binary signal, and it's a variable voltage that indicates speed or distance traveled or something like that. Oh, wow, that would be awful. Good news, though. Labs ruled out the variable voltage theory pretty quickly, and they came back with a fairly janky version too that did add motion. Oh, wow. That is... good job, Labs team. Oh, okay, I can kind of move right by doing this. It only moves right? Bah! Oh, I got the shotgun. Obviously then, while not nothing, our first attempt wasn't the home run that we hoped it would be, and we weren't really sure where to go from here. There could be any number of problems at this point. Could we be misinterpreting the signals? Absolutely. Could there be a problem with the hardware? I mean, totally. It's
Penis
30
there,
years old,
level
no matter how
5.
good it looks. And, I mean, why not both of those things? So, at this stage, we felt it would be prudent to crack her open and give her a little advance. Studies progress, now available, ltcstore.com. Ooh, wow. While we might look at a design like this today and say, boy, that's
Check it.
simple. You gotta give it full credit for longevity. I mean, it's hard for a trace that thick to spontaneously fail from, heating and cooling cycles. Also, these really are two different models of switch. They intended for them to feel different. Input comes from these rotary encoders here, which we gave a light cleaning to.
Check it out now. The Funk Soul Brothers right about now. The Funk Soul Brothers.
We're probably misinterpreting
Check
the
it.
signal, which unfortunately is a much more difficult fix. Of course, with this much invested in the project, what were we going to do? Give up? No. So, the labs pored over the schematics and identified the two integrated circuits at the heart of the mouse as the K561TM2, which, when you track down a datasheet and then translate it, turns out to be a flip-flop, which is basically one bit of memory, a 0 or a 1. And each of our two ICs contains two of these flip-flops, along with the ability to clear or reset them. And suddenly, that reset pin that we couldn't figure out before becomes the star of the show. As it turns out, the flip-flops are telling us which direction or directions that the mouse last moved, positive, negative, or stationary, on each axis. Then, all we have to do is reset the flip-flops to their default state, wait some tiny amount of time, and then check them again to see what's happened, rinse and repeat forever. Our Pico then can take that information and tell our cursor to move slightly in whatever direction we're meant to be moving. Now, we're not sure how often it would have gone through these cycles on a BK.
How about 50 hertz if it's
But
calling 50
for
times?
trial and error, we were able to push it to around 4.5 kilohertz, or around 4,500 times a second. I mean, that seems pretty solid, right? I should be able to game on, 4,500 times a second. Yeah. Oh. I mean, there is no question in my mind, this mouse is working. I'm not only able to play, I'm able to enjoy playing the game. Flippin' crazy. By the way, did the shotgun take that guy out here? Yes. Wow, that is still not great. I mean, good job, Labs team. What I will say though is, compared to the cable, the ergonomics are far more bothersome. My wrist is already acting up. I've been using it for like 5 minutes. This is atrocious. Like, we had plastic molding technology, but we didn't have the technology of what shape is an actual human hand. And that's far from the only problem. While it is usable, it's really slow. I am all over my desk pad here. And these are both things that we could fix, right? Like, if we tweak the Pico to move farther, right, on each pole, then yeah, it could be a lot faster. But that would make the jitteriness go up. We could get the jitteriness to go away by making it not move as far, so it's not skipping 10 pixels each time. But then it would be even slower. Oh crap, I'm gonna die. I have 8 health, I died. I blame the equipment. In conclusion then, while the Martian is technically a gaming mouse in that games on it, meaning our title is not clickbait, realistically, it's more just a cool piece of retro technology that never made it to the West, and an excuse to show off how the lab is going to help us continue to make better videos, even if now this is a $350 mouse plus however many hundreds of dollars of labs time, all for something that is so much worse than my Pico Wireless. And so much worse than the segue to our sponsor. Circuit Specialists. They provide electronic components and tools to the STEM community at competitive prices. We're talking resistors, capacitors, soldering stations, oscilloscopes, positronic carbonium reactors, and more stuff that is real. These kinds of tools and parts are often either unavailable or too expensive. But thanks to Circuit Specialists' technological and sourcing expertise, now anyone can access them. Their commitment to quality means you receive reliable and high-performance products suited for your needs. Let Circuit Specialists help you upgrade your electronics toolkit. Check them out at the link below and use code LMG for 10% off. If you enjoyed this video, maybe check out our full retro review, retro review? Whatever, of the Razer Boom Slam, which I would say arguably was the last truly high-end gaming ball mouse.
This review of the Asus ROG Ally is going to be dense. We'll be going through gaming performance, battery life, noise, frequency spectrum in the GN hemianechoic chamber, thermals, discussion of the SD card situation, and how actually great it is to take the Ally apart. We're very excited about doing this review, and it's been fun to work on because we got to work with a bunch of different handheld devices, but there's also a lot of complexity to them. So there's a mixture of things that we really liked, like the assembly, and things that we didn't like the micro SD card reader breaking. We compared the Ally against the Steam Deck, the Nintendo Switch, and some older INU devices. We're also working on some competing handhelds next. And all of that means this review will be long. We're coming in late the review cycle here because we waited to buy this unit. We were on a wait list for it, pre-ordered it, and we got it in, and we decided to just throw everything in here. So we expect that many of you will jump around the review, and that's totally fine. We've timestamped things below, so you can do that. They're mostly containerized sections. Some kind of rely on others, but for the most part, they're standalone. And we're mixing things like objective analysis of the FPS, the battery life, things like that, and some subjective discussion of the hardware, as in physical feel of the device, and software, alongside some shared thoughts from both Patrick and I on the teardown process. So we've got a bit of everything in here. Let's get started. Before that, this video is brought to you by us and our brand new 15-year anniversary edition large anti-static mod mat for PC building. The GN15 large mod mat features 4 grounding snap points, 1 at each corner to make it easy to move around your work area for PC builds. Plus, it has a ton of new diagrams and useful pinout information. The mat is designed to not only protect your table and your parts from dings and scratches during the build, but also provide useful information on common front panel connector wiring, standard fan orientation, pinouts, and it offers functionality with screw tracking grids and sorters so that you can more easily reassemble components. This highly durable surface is also great for working with heat guns, like for tube bending and for water cooling projects. The mat is already available and it's shipping now on store.gamersnexus.net, and it's the best way to help us fund this type of ultra deep dive review content so that we can produce more of it. Thanks for your support, and grab a mod mat today on store.gamersnexus.net. The Asus ROG Ally had a weird start to life because it began as an April Fool's joke that wasn't funny enough to be fake. And actually, it's 2 handhelds. There's 2 Allies. One has a Ryzen Z1 Extreme processor, basically an R7 7840U at $700, and the other Ally is a cut-down Ryzen Z1, which would be $600. Both of these are called the ROG Ally RC71L, and both come with Zen 4 plus RDNA 3 APUs. But one has 8 cores and 16 threads with 12 CUs, while the other has 6 cores and 12 threads with 4 CUs. The $700 Z1 Extreme has a chance at being the handheld price-to-performance leader between competitors like the top-of-the-line GPD Win 4 and the Aya Neo Quinn on one end, and the relatively inexpensive Steam Deck on the other. However, there have been some widely reported problems with the Ally since its launch. First, with performance degradation from a Force BIOS update, and then a flood of broken micro SD cards. We'll talk about all that as well, but let's start with some hardware impressions. Starting with what's included. The Ally's packaging is pretty simple, especially for an ROG product. The
I have no idea where you're shooting.
Power adapter, a cheap small cardboard stand, and that's it. Based on our experience with other handheld PCs, a docking station with USB Ethernet display out and a carrying case are necessary accessories. The Ally's 1080p 120Hz FreeSync screen is a major selling point on paper, but we have mixed practical feelings about it. On the positive side, 1080p is still the most common gaming resolution, whereas the Steam Deck's 1280 by 800 screen, which is actually rotated, requires letterboxing or stretching in some games. The Ally screen displays brighter colors out of the box than the 512GB Steam Deck, meaning the Steam Deck can appear washed out in comparison. On the other hand, it can be difficult to take advantage of the Ally's high refresh rate, since a lot of AAA games will struggle to run on this device above 60 FPS at 1080p. But the extra pixels versus the deck do help with other smaller details, like text legibility. An XG mobile unit with a laptop 3080, not a real 3080, costs $1,500 from Best Buy. That's insane. While Asus is selling a laptop 4090, which is definitely not a real 4090, for $2,000. We have nothing against eGPUs, but the proprietary standard is awful. And the price isn't great either. ROG's Flow connector is annoyingly close to the non-proprietary Oculus currently used by GPD's G1 eGPU, and there's not a great reason to not use a standard. The Ally is slightly smaller than a Steam Deck on paper. It's 28 centimeters for the Ally versus 29.8 for the deck, and the Ally has slimmer grips. In practice, the Ally takes up basically the same amount of space in a bag or in your lap. A more significant factor, though, is the Ally's weight. It's 608 grams to the deck's 669 grams. Plus or minus some error, anyway. That weight may be a bad long-term choice for a device that's meant to be touched constantly, but it looks great out of the box, especially with the RGB lighting around both the joysticks. The deck is pretty different. The Ally, on the other hand, stick to a 100% like the joystick positions and the round D-pad. The Ally is more familiar, while the deck's twin touchpads give it more versatility. Actual feel is highly subjective. It's hard for us to comment on that meaningfully in a way that helps you. Patrick thinks that the Valve's oversized grips make the deck more comfortable, but he thinks the Ally's rear buttons are easier to use. I personally find that the Ally's rear buttons are more difficult to use, and while the decks are easier for me, I don't think they're good enough to be treated as a standard. So in other words, two people have different opinions on a subjective matter. Go figure. We really wish that the Ally included more than one built-in USB port, which would give it a big boost over the deck. We're tired of single-port devices here, but there's space for more. We're also disappointed that Asus limited SSD compatibility to 2230 drives. This was a huge opportunity to beat the deck. 2230 drives are more expensive per gigabyte than 2280 drives, and their smaller physical size limits their capacity in most cases. Starting with the first thing we noticed, Asus has gotten far too comfortable forcing automatic BIOS updates. Updates aren't inherently bad, and they often add security, but forcing them without a warning is bad. And so is shoving out a bunch of half-baked hotfixes in rapid succession, which they did. As soon as we connected our allies to the internet, Windows Update immediately downloaded and flashed a BIOS update. 2 days later, the My Asus app forced another BIOS update in the background without any input from us. In fact, it didn't even tell us that it was a BIOS update. It just told us to save our files and buckle up. For some reason, My Asus is separate from Armory Crate, another software hub responsible for yet another set of software and firmware updates, and the one that's used as the default front end for the Ally. The second BIOS update that My Asus forced was version 319, a version which has known performance issues and which Asus had specifically advised against installing nearly a week prior to forcing it on us. Asus said, quote, some users are reporting lowered performance on the latest BIOS 319. If you want to hold off on that BIOS update, you can. Thanks for the clear language. Apparently, we can't, Asus. We opened My Asus to disable automatic updates, but we found that it's impossible to control or interact with the app at all without creating an account and logging in, even as it actively installs updates. In contrast to My Asus, Armory Crate almost looks good. It's still disgusting that Asus and Gigabyte and maybe MSI now injects bloatware into Windows via motherboard firmware, but at least it has a purpose on the Ally. The Armory Crate overlay works similarly to the Steam Decks, but with customizable shortcuts for things like power plans, FPS limiters, and Radeon Super Resolution. The biggest strike against it is that almost all of its functions, other than LED control, are just shortcuts for controls that already exist elsewhere. Also, having not one but two physical buttons on the Ally bound to both open an Armory Crate gives us a bad feeling, like the OEM-specific buttons on old keyboards. The Windows 11 Touch keyboard makes a massive difference for Windows on touchscreen devices, and this is actually one of the stronger points of having Windows on a device like this. We've come a long way since the INEO Founder shipped with a physical button to bring up the on-screen keyboard. The Windows 11 Touch keyboard, different from the Windows on-screen keyboard, behaves exactly like a touchscreen phone. It appears whenever a text field is selected. We also can't overstate how much easier this makes it to control Windows on a handheld. it's completely possible to use the Ally without peripherals.
I think they ran away.
Even more so than with desktop mode on SteamOS. Asus has also predefined some macros for things like taking screenshots and opening Task Manager. That's on top of the most obvious Windows advantage, which is that the apps these handhelds are meant to run are often native to Windows, not Linux. Of course, Windows can be installed on a Steam Deck, and SteamOS can, unofficially, be installed on an ROG Ally, but the out-of-the-box experiences were beginner-friendly on the Ally. Windows defaults to running at 1920 by 1080 with 150% scaling on the Ally, which is cramped on a screen this size. You can change it though. 720p and 1080p are the only display modes supported without enabling VSR. Or
There's one behind you somewhere.
So these are the only full-screen resolutions that games offer. We're now moving to our hemi-anechoic chamber, and projecting in here is always very strange because of how quiet it is. But we have a separate video talking about how we built it. We have a news video talking about why we built it at a basic level. And then our Fractal Terra ITX review was the first product that we actually used the chamber on. And that video contains a lot of background on what we do with it and what the numbers mean. So we won't be going into as much of that background information in this video, but we'll link all those below in case you really care about why and how it works. So although we have data for each of these devices, under idle conditions, low load conditions, and full load conditions, we're only going to focus on presenting the full load conditions with different power states. So that'd be like turbo, performance, plugged in, not plugged in, things like that. And the reason we're not bothering with idle states, for the most part anyway, have some basic numbers in there, but is because the devices are already so quiet that it kind of becomes irrelevant. But it's the load where the fans have a lot of chance to differentiate themselves. Frequency, we might have a higher pitched approach versus a lower pitched approach between device. For numbers, we're going to present frequency spectrum, and then we're also presenting the dBA SPLs, which is the noise level, so to speak. And additionally, we have some noise samples for you. So we'll start with those. So before we go to the objective plots, here's a couple noise samples to get you accustomed to the sound. We're boosting these by the same amount in each file and host so you can hear them more clearly, but we'll have unboosted numbers for the analysis. Here's a sample of the Ally, and it's loudest
Spread out.
plugged in and with turbo mode. In this clip, you can hear a generally higher tone from the fan. And here's another sample of the Ally in a more common unplugged scenario with performance mode. It's much quieter overall, and the frequency is also lower. Unlike the Ally, the Steam Deck caps its frame rate and disallows tearing at a system level by default. Here's a sample of the Steam Deck in its loudest condition, uncapped with tearing allowed, so full frame rate and unplugged. That's a typical position in the Steam Deck's fan ramp cycle, but it has a couple of those. So this is the same test, but with the RPM in a higher part of its fan ramp cycle. In that clip, you can hear that it ramps, purges the heat, and then slows back down. And here's one of the Steam Deck with a 60 FPS cap and no tearing. And finally, here's a sample of the Nintendo Switch. You won't hear much. What we can hear is a little bit of a higher frequency, but the total noise is very low. It's close to the noise floor that we have tested. Okay, now we have a foundation for the frequency analysis. This chart is going to get kind of crazy. First, some update. We've truncated the frequency start to 20 Hz this time. We've also changed the major grid line stepping, or the white lines, to increment in steps of 10 dB. This is because a 10 dB jump is widely regarded as effectively doubling perceived volume to a given ear. Finally,
Up top!
From minus 75 last time to minus 40. These improvements to the chart legibility came from viewers of our Terra review. If you have further suggestions on this and you have some background with this kind of data, we'd love to hear from you as we're making improvements to
I don't know, why didn't you let me get under this overhang first so I couldn't shoot from above the cities up top?
Of a set of data across a moment in time, with the frequency on the bottom and the SPL dBRMS on the left axis. The data is representative of a common steady-state fan behavior for each device. We do have some extra notes on the Steam Deck, though. You heard it was more variable than the others. Okay, let's get past the blank chart. The Ally starts us off. It's plugged in and set to turbo, so it's the loudest possible condition. We noticed the device was overall subjectively loud, particularly at the more annoying higher frequencies when compared to the other devices. We can see this manifest particularly in the 2,000 to 5,000 Hz range, with a steep fall off as we approach 6,000 Hz. Speaking with
New
ours
Jersey.
from Cybernetics and Harvard Busters, one of our
What?
contributors for
New
acoustic
Jersey?
Yes, quote, 2 to 5 kilohertz.
What the
Important
fuck?
frequency zone for us humans. Our ears are most sensitive there. This doesn't mean that lower bands can't be annoying. Also, depending on age, frequencies above 15 to 16 kilohertz
New
don't play a
Jersey.
role, especially if you're over 30. Now, this quote from Art should help give us some perspective. Subjective. Although his beliefs regarding the most sensitive range are opinion by that. Each person may have some differences. Our other peer reviewer for this content was Mike Chen, founder of Silent PC Review and an acoustic consultant today. He had this context to add for our viewers. The 3 to 5 kilohertz region is where tonal sounds bother us the most. A primary reason often cited is that this is the range where baby crying falls. But we generally hear the entire middle range, say 120 Hz to 5 kilohertz, very well, and can be sensitive to any tonalities in that region. Think of the frequency range of a standard 88-key piano. The lowest note, fundamental, is 27.5 Hz. The highest is 4186 Hz. Middle C, or C5, is 261.63. Imagine middle C held down continuously on an organ, even at low volume. It wouldn't take long for you to get bothered by it, and that's just 261.63 Hz. And again, that quote is from Mike Chen, who contributed significantly to the fundamentals of silent PC component testing and has been helping peer review all of our acoustic content so far. But the Ally isn't only plugged in if it's handheld, so let's go to unplugged and performance mode. This is the more common use case. In this mode, the Ally drops significantly in overall volume, which we'll get to. It also has a softer fall-off in frequency towards the upper end. We no longer have the elevated power in the 3,000 to 5,000 Hz range, and the tone more gradually softens above that. Adding silent mode, we instantly see that it definitely does what its name says by reducing the volume. The entire spectrum is shortened following the reduction in total dBA. But particularly we see a reduction in the 2500 to 3800 Hz range. Adding the Steam Deck with VSync on, we see a noise level that most closely follows the silent mode Ally, except for a deviation in the 1400 to 2000 Hz range. Keep in mind that the Steam Deck has 2 fan suppliers, but we plotted their differences previously. Ours here is the Huawei fan. Disabling VSync allows the Steam Deck to get much hotter in this workload from uncapped frame rate, drastically increasing the noise levels overall, but especially in the 1200 to 2000 Hz range, and then again in the 3500 to 4000 Hz range. The point it falls is
Beacon behind you!
And plugged in.
Oh my god!
Disabling VSync also causes a lot more fan ramp and deramp, which is generally more observable from the change, but not reflected here since this is only a moment in time. We noticed there was typically 2 to 4 dBA change between band speeds during the course of
4 seconds to go
this
again.
segment was
What
one
am I
of the
gonna
louder
do?
ones. Finally,
Get fucking
completing
smoked by the storm again? Cool.
Similar to the Silent Ally and VSync Steam Deck, with the noteworthy difference that it's also quieter at the lower end of the frequency spectrum. Enough of that, those sections will get shorter as we get more experience presenting them, but for now we're still learning how to present that data. Let's move to a simpler chart, noise levels. This shows the total volume, so to speak, in dBA and under certain conditions. All tests are at 20 inches, the noise floor was about 13.6 dBA across all tests. Our chamber can be as low as 11 dBA or as high as 14, but it was 13.6 here. The switch was quiet enough to be difficult to measure. It was effectively the noise floor from a front-on perspective of the user or the microphone. The Steam Deck with VSync on in its lower part of the ramp cycle was around 15.4 dBA and the next quietest device. Next is the Ally in silent mode at 16.4 dBA, so about the same volume as the prior Steam Deck entry, but slightly noticeably louder than the Switch. The higher end of the fan ramp cycle on the Steam Deck brought us to 19.7 with VSync on, a noticeable increase in volume. Valve could tune its fan curve for a less observable change here. VSync off was loud and has 3 entries we'll highlight. 24.1 dBA at the low end of the ramp, 28.2 typically, so that's what you normally hear, and 32.1 dBA during a bursted high ramp cycle, which is loud. The Ally maxed out at 26.8 dBA, which is similar to the Deck during its typical cycle with VSync off. Now we'll talk about the disassembly process. We didn't take this apart until after we completely finalized testing in all charts, including stuff after this. I first took it apart to wire up some thermocouples, and then later Patrick took it apart to investigate the SD card reader integrated circuit, basically, to try and look for signs of failure. So let's go to Patrick first for the thoughts of just the assembly itself.
Steve has torn down the Ally a little bit, and I've torn it down a little bit further. I was hunting for the SD card controller, but I think both of us have been pretty impressed by how easy it was to take the Ally apart and how maintainable it is in general. So I'm just going to walk through starting from the outside. There's only 6 screws holding in the back shell here, and then once you have taken the screws out, it just pops off. The Steam Deck shell is very difficult to pry apart. The Ally, not so much. The thumbsticks and the battery, I think, are the most likely candidates for replacement, and those can be taken out without removing other pieces. Heatsink can be left on the motherboard. You know, you can take out the
God damn.
motherboard as a full unit with the heatsink and fans on.
Why do you guys go to those fights so often?
But these fans should
Just
be
fucking-
pretty easily replaceable as well. You know, you can just undo these cables and then they're just taped on here and screwed in. I think overall, this is a pretty modular unit. The back shell and the internal parts, all of the ones that I removed, there's only 3 different types of screws among them. One of them is specifically for the speakers. There are no tamper screws on the outside of the unit, and there are no hidden screws. Yes, there are anti-tamper stickers, but they're not going to stop you from opening up the unit, and they're not going to stop you from, I think, replacing the SSD or some of the other obvious candidates for cleaning and maintenance, like the thumbsticks. Because this is a mobile all-in-one unit, you know, in terms of upgrading, really, you're just going to swap out the SSD, and there's not a whole lot else to do here. But overall, I'd say this is a pretty good effort by Asus. I had some issues with the software, but on the hardware side, very, very maintainable.
That's it for benchmarking methodology and setup. So we're covering a ton in this review. These tests are just a representative sample. We're comparing the ROG Ally, again, the top-of-the-line $700 model, against the 512 gigabyte Steam Deck, as well as 2 older Aya Neo devices. That's the Next and the Founder, and we're adding some more devices to this in the near future. When benchmarking individual components, or especially frame rate, we download the latest available drivers, and for the Ally, we did one different thing, which is we replicated a typical user experience. That means applying updates through Windows Update, MyAsus, and Armory Crate, rather than manually hunting down the drivers. We then pause the updates for the duration of testing. This is the experience that Asus largely steers its users towards, because they want people to treat it like a handheld console rather than a gaming PC. So we followed that direction as end users, and we did it that way. For other controls, FreeSync was disabled on the Ally, and unless otherwise noted, VSync was disabled and tearing allowed on the Steam Deck. We use the term VSync out of convenience, but VSync isn't technically accurate on the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck's panel is actually portrait mode, and so the screen refreshes move side to side with vertical tearing. We also experienced some bugs around tearing and frame rate caps on the deck, which we discussed with Valve, and we came away with some interesting information. Firstly, even if you want VSync, which is valuable mostly for battery life preservation purposes, not tearing, there's no real reason to enable it in-game on the deck, according to the Valve here. Quote, by default, GameScope always synchronizes output frames to the physical display, unless that allow tearing option is checked. It enables immediate flips in the kernel driver. We also had issues with the OS level 60 Hz cap being applied on boot, without being shown in the UI, but we were eventually able to gather a full set of uncapped, tearing-enabled deck results. And if you want to learn more about all of this, actually GameScope and many other elements of the SteamOS are open source and fully available on GitHub. First, some important background about how TDP numbers are often not representative of real power consumption. The Ally has 3 operating modes. They are Windows power plans. They're Silent, Performance, and Turbo. It defaults to Performance on battery and Turbo when plugged in, or a mode can be selected manually through Armory Crate. Asus describes Silent as 10 watts, Performance as 15 watts, and Turbo as 25 watts on battery and 30 watts on wall power. As usual though, TDP numbers shouldn't be ignored in favor of observable measurements. TDP is often not fully representative of real power consumption, but it depends on how the company calculates TDP. Some are closer than others. TDP also changes between CPUs, so the older AMD formula doesn't necessarily apply to all of their CPUs. Under load, a plugged-in Ally with a full battery, 30 watt TDP, can easily draw the full 65 watts that the AC adapter is capable of delivering. while the Steam Deck, a 15-watt TDP, pulls 30 watts under the same conditions. Without confirmation of actual power draw, it is inappropriate to assume Asus's 15 watts is the same as Valve's 15 watts. So 15 watts does not necessarily equal 15 watts in terms of how unlocked or enabled the device is. It could be different. Now, that's stated to really fully understand these, you'd have to tap into the battery and measure the actual power exchange there. But realistically, an end user will just set one of these modes or the other. So our solution to this is to test in all relevant modes and then also test battery consumption in all relevant modes and give you both charts separately. Cyberpunk 2077 starts us out. We're using the low preset, running at 1280 by 720 without upscaling, and using these settings on all devices for a like-for-like test. When plugged into the wall and with Turbo active, the ROG Ally is the clear frontrunner in performance, averaging 47% ahead of the deck at 63 FPS. However, its lows are not scaling well with that average. We'll look at frame times for that momentarily. In handheld mode with the default performance profile, the Ally's average is slightly behind the deck's at 40 FPS, and the older Aya Neo devices lag behind at 31 FPS for the Next, and 23 for the Founder. We confirmed through testing that the Ally is the only one of these devices that significantly alters performance when plugged in. So all of our non-Ally results were logged on battery power. Handheld performance is what really matters though, and starting out at parity with the Steam Deck is bad news for the more expensive Ally. What's even worse for the Ally is the frame time consistency. Holding a 9 FPS, 0.1% low when on battery as compared to the deck's 30 FPS lows has the deck clearly advantaged. Let's look at a frame time plot. Here it is. As a reminder, these represent the frame-to-frame interval in milliseconds.
I think it's time to move.
Time for the system to prepare, render, and flip the frame to the screen. Lower is better, but more consistent is best. The Ally on battery starts with a wide 10 to 20 millisecond frame-to-frame range, but it starts running into big problems as the test advances. We encounter a series of excursions from about 22 to 30 milliseconds all the way up to 100 milliseconds. That's terrible. It's the technical word for it. We're looking for an 8 to 12 millisecond range, but the Ally has a range, or a max minus min, upwards of 90 milliseconds. The Steam Deck, by comparison, is much smoother in frame delivery. The beginning of the test is the smoothest once again, and then deviates more as the test progresses. However, the deck stays within our expected range for the entire test. This is a significant gameplay experience advantage over the Ally, and it shows that average, once again, doesn't tell the whole story. Dying Light 2 is next, with Dying Light 2 manually configured to the low preset. We manually switched to the X12 with the asynchronous compute enabled, and we controlled the settings because the low preset has changed its settings with updates, so we manually set those. The Ally's plugged-in performance was 47 FPS average, 32% ahead of its 36 FPS average on battery power. Trimming the Z1 Extreme Power Allowance hurts relative performance in some games more than it does in others. Because of that, we also ran a turbo pass with the Ally actively charging to see whether charging the battery would eat into the APU's power, but the performance difference was minor. Some of the swings and when the power allowance benefits more versus less have to do with which component specifically is consuming that TDP allowance. So, in other words, how much of a CPU or GPU component bind there might be. The Steam Deck averaged 29 FPS in this test, behind the battery-powered results for the Ally, and that's unlike the tied Cyberpunk results. One thing that is consistent, though, is the inconsistency of frame times. The Ally once again suffers as compared to the deck. Here's a frame time plot for Dying Light 2. Once again, the Ally struggles hard. Its first major set of spikes go to 170 milliseconds, so 17% of a second, you're sitting there staring at the same image. The next frame is back down towards 16 milliseconds, then it's back up towards 70 milliseconds. This presents as a stuttery set of images. We then encounter similar spikes around frame 250, 450, and 780. The Ally is inconsistent in its frame time performance. This is traditionally a combination of drivers and power delivery, and the power gating behavior on the Ally may be causing some of the spikiness.
I got you. I can heal you.
Flatter line. There's a single large spike to about 125 milliseconds for the deck, which is visible in gameplay, but the rest of the line remains remarkably and impressively flat. Resident Evil 4 is next. We did most of our testing at low settings, since that's what these handhelds are generally capable of at 720p. For Resident Evil 4, though, we chose the prioritized graphics preset, again, without any upscaling. This is another instance where we also double...
Is there an enemy there or no?
And here, the battery-powered Ally tied the Steam Deck at 26 FPS and 27 FPS respectively. The plugged-in Ally managed 36 FPS, or 34% ahead of the Steam Deck. The loads are much better in this particular game. Our estimation, again, is that the frame time consistency...
Why did you push that like that? You're an idiot. Your teammates didn't even know what the fuck was going on.
And of the power gauge, whatever it may be, the end result is observable, and the ally is tripping over itself in some games, but not others. The good news is that this doesn't appear to be indicative of performance in all scenarios. The ally did better overall here, although tying a cheaper device still isn't a winning position. You'd have to look at the quality of life features discussed elsewhere in the review to find the value. Frame times for Resident Evil 4 are much better. The ally is still more variable frame to frame than the deck, but we're not running into the massive stuttery spikes. Red Dead Redemption 2 at 720p is our final game test using the Vulkan API and a favorite performance preset, which again we then fixed those settings to ensure they don't vary. As usual, the Ally's wall power turbo mode was significantly ahead of the handheld performance mode, 55% in this instance. The Ally's performance mode is nearly tied with the deck, and frame times are actually okay on all devices here. Sometimes the Ally on battery power is better than the Steam Deck.
Very weird how this app works.
It's clear that the Ally's maxed out turbo mode puts it far ahead of the Steam Deck in performance, but it's also not practical to run turbo mode without plugging the Ally in, which defeats the purpose. On that subject, let's take a look at the battery life. On all devices, the speakers were muted, screen brightness was set to 50%, and screen dimming was disabled. Sleep was also disabled unless otherwise noted. Note also that screen brightness at 50% is not a perfect control, and we want you to be aware of that. To completely control for this, we need to take lux measurements and then match the lux. We're looking into this improvement as a possibility for our testing in the future. Device performance settings were left at out-of-the-box defaults, unless otherwise noted. We used our special patent-pending battery life spring tension tester, something we developed in the lab, to run these tests with constant user input. Fortunately, this device is extremely hard for anyone to copy, so... Battery life is measured from the beginning of the load to the point where the device automatically shuts down or hibernates. We opted to mostly test at the native resolution of the individual devices. We're not comparing frame rates here, so it doesn't matter. We're seeing how long the batteries last under normal usage conditions. We'll start with the simplest battery life test, looping one of our own 4K 60 videos at full screen and the native desktop version of VLC for each of our devices. Note that full screen in this instance is 1280 by 720 letterbox for the non-Ally devices, and 1920 by 1080 for the Ally. The Ally outlasted the deck here by 67% at 216 minutes versus 129. The deck audibly ramped fans and struggled for the duration of the test. Our Aya Neo Next with 5800U and integrated big graphics actually outlasted both at 246 minutes, and both the Founder and the Next are equipped with 47 watt-hour batteries to the deck and the Ally's 40 watt-hour. Moving to games, we first ran a test with F122 at medium presets with VSync disabled and variable rate shading disabled. This is with the frame rate uncapped. We'll look at the capped results next. F122 easily exceeds 60 FPS with these settings, so this represents a best case scenario for taking advantage of the Ally's 120Hz display. The power plant was clearly the limiting factor on the Ally. Using the default performance operating mode of both 720p and 1080p, the Ally lasted 100 minutes. While manually bumping the power plan up to turbo at 1080p drops battery life to 63 minutes. Remember, turbo on battery power has lower power limits than turbo on wall power. 100 minutes in performance mode isn't as bad as it sounds. The Steam Deck, for example, lasted almost exactly as long with VSync disabled. And that lines up with our previous DMC5 testing from the deck's launch. Let's take a moment to consider what those results mean. Using out-of-the-box default settings, the Ally and the Steam Deck are effectively tied in battery life for this test, and they're usually, but not always, tied in terms of FPS under the same conditions, ignoring frame time. This is an underwhelming result for the Ally, but it does have more performance headroom. Next, we ran Dead Cells. This is a 2D game with pixel art, so we ran it at native screen resolution with VSync enabled to represent a common handheld gaming scenario, one which we already tested for the Steam Deck's launch. On the Ally, VSync means 120 Hz unless settings are tweaked, which is likely why the Ally only lasted 167 minutes to the deck's 365, less than half the total playtime. Even with the 60 Hz cap applied, though, the Ally only lasted 207 minutes. If we need to cap the Ally to 60 Hz in order to reach half the deck's battery life, it defeats a lot of the purpose of having that 120 Hz panel, other than Other differences like resolution. Time to talk charge time. The Ally was the fastest of the handhelds to recharge from 0%. With the system turned off and charging for a full cycle, peak power draw was 53 watts, which dropped sharply after 30 minutes to about 30 watts, then gradually fell until the charge cycle completed at about 98 minutes. In comparison, the Steam Deck took 168 minutes to charge, despite having the same nominal battery capacity. There are 2 points we'd like to make here. First, plugging in a higher wattage adapter doesn't always make these devices just charge faster. With the systems off and doing nothing except charging, none of them hit the max capacity of their charger, 45 watts for the deck and 65 for the others. The Ally's adapter has little headroom for charging and gaming at the same time. A Steam Deck can run games at full performance while charging, whereas gaming without charging already maxes out the Ally's charger. We didn't see any significant performance degradation from gaming while charging on the Ally, but it may extend charging time, of course. Let's look at thermals and fan behavior by proxy of looking at the thermals. This is done first with F122 as a gaming load, and then we'll look at Blender. In this chart, you're seeing the torture scenario on the Ally. It's plugged in, running turbo mode, and it's at 100% screen brightness. So this is about a worst case scenario for it. That hard ramp to about 96 degrees Celsius that you're seeing is when it's waiting for the fans to respond. Asus has stated it went with a less aggressive fan curve to try and temper the noise, something that it talked about publicly closer to its launch. And that's evident here. We think that they should probably kick the fans into higher speeds sooner in this curve, though. The high temperature is from a delayed start on those fans ramping to the higher speeds, which eventually do bring up the RPM, and that brings the temperature to more reasonable levels. The occasional spikes are during loading screens where the fan behavior oscillates. Here's the chart at steady state. The hottest set of tests we have at steady state, once we're past the initial fan ramp where the APU is hitting TJ Max, would be the torture workload, hitting between 75 and 77 degrees Celsius on the APU and SoC components. And the drive here was in the 60s, which is okay. This test was with the screen max at 100% and the charger plugged in, so once again a worst case. Unplugging the charger drops turbo mode power consumption, so it's no longer a pure light for light, but the end result is similar, right about 73 to 75 degrees Celsius. Adjusting only the brightness drops that by another few degrees Celsius. And remember that changing the modes like performance and turbo, or changing whether it's plugged in, will possibly affect the fan speed depending on the configuration, which affects temperature too, not just the power. Screen brightness here definitely has an impact on thermals, but that makes sense.
I've gotten through 40 years of life. I think it's gone pretty well. Pretty wealthy. Got my house, so what do you mean? Yeah, no. You said, see how that works out for you? It's been working out for me this entire fucking time, bro. What are you talking about? You're out of town, stupid. My microphone sucks. What mic do you think I'm using, buddy? What do you think I'm using, audio expert?
Something's wrong with you.
What do you mean you're proving my point? You said, see how that works out. It's worked out pretty well, like I told you.
You're fucking up my game, bro.
I'm fucking up your game. How am I fucking up your game? I wasn't even the one who started. I wasn't even the. You're the one who's talking back. Are you have any self-awareness, buddy? It's a conversation. Two people are in it. Holy fuck. You got fucked with so much you had to mute me. Ah, gamer. Back to the video.
The power reduction that performance claims. Moving to silent mode drops even further, around another 10 degrees, depending on which metric you look at. And we've got acoustics separately for all these modes as well, of course. Thermally, only the brief slams against the 96 degrees Celsius wall are concerning, but those appear to only briefly pop up while waiting for the fans to really kick into gear. Asus could adjust the hysteresis here, or effectively the fan curve, to tackle this, and this could be done via BIOS, so they could change it at any time if they wanted to. Ultimately, though, the temperature came back down rapidly, and it didn't stay elevated in a way that would concern us about the CPU and GPU components. The SD card, however, is a separate matter. We'll get to that later. With a CPU torture workload using Blender, so nearly 0% GPU and 100% CPU, we can even more clearly see the fan behavior reflected in the thermals. The CPU T-die reading was 95 degrees Celsius for nearly 3.5 minutes. That's far too slow of a fan ramp here, because you're already losing clocks in that time. Asus needs to rework the hysteresis, we think. It's going to get loud anyway, but throttling for several minutes before getting loud, or if not throttling, just running this hot, it's really not a good trade-off. You can just accept a little more noise. They also cool it to a temperature that, at least for the APU, is unnecessary anyway. Asus could meet in the middle. They could improve both the initial load thermals and the steady-state noise levels while maintaining an acceptable combination of both. It's possible that some other component needs the fan aggression, though, without probing everything on the board. We can't be certain that that's the case. In order to test the micro SD thermal pattern that's been so widely discussed, we first needed to get a micro SD card detected in the Ally, which proved a lot more difficult than we thought it would be. We tried a SanDisk Extreme Plus 128GB, a SanDisk Extreme 512GB, a PNY Premier X256, and a Samsung Pro Plus 256. We bought a couple different brands. All of these are completely functional cards that show up on other devices, as well as the Ally itself, if connected through a USB card reader. We formatted as exFAT, we tried NTFS, as recommended by the official ASUS guide, we tried FAT32, and we tried disabling and re-enabling the SD card reader in BIOS and Device Manager. We also tried downloading and installing every possible driver, software, and firmware update from the ASUS website, as well as Windows Update, MyASUS, and Armory Crate. We tried booting into the built-in MyASUS in WinRe diagnostic tool, which has tests for pretty much everything except for the SD card reader. And we tried running a system repair. So all of that wasn't to test the problem. That was to try and get an SD card working in the device at all, micro SD in the top here. And because we couldn't get one working, we think we've come to the conclusion that our device has already been a victim of the micro SD card problem. Much of the secondary and user reporting has focused on the SD cards themselves, but upon reviewing ASUS's official statement, which it posted on Discord, the wording was, quote, under certain thermal stress conditions, the SD card reader may malfunction. They also said, quote, if you are currently experiencing issues with your SD card reader. Well, our SD card reader is malfunctioning, and it has been since basically we got it. We had thermocouples wired to the micro SD card reader internally and some of the other chips around it, but we never were able to make use of any of that because since we can't get a card to reliably detect, to generate any kind of load to thermally stress it, like transferring files, they were useless. It's effectively the reader itself appears to be more or less dead on our device. One thing we're wondering is whether this is an issue with the Genesis Logic GL9755 SD card reader controller in general, not just thermals. Either way, we have confirmed that there is a problem. We just never got to test what may be causing it. Patrick even checked under a microscope for visible damage to the SD
cool job, bro.
Reader, and we can't see any. Now, to get any further here, we'd have to send it out to an external lab for failure analysis, which we might not do. We'll see if it's worth it or not. But what we can confirm is that, yes, this is a problem, because the micro SD card reader issue did occur for us. ASUS has acknowledged it as well, so we know it's a real thing. We just don't know what triggered it precisely. So, in theory, ASUS says some of its updates, like the BIOS, should prevent the SD card reader from malfunctioning.
How?
It's very hard to prove a negative because we're trying to prove it no longer fails.
How's IT working out for you?
But to do any further testing, we would need to buy another Ally, install the updates, and then use it, and at some point draw a line and say, okay, it's probably fixed. So for now, what we can say is the issue did happen, and ASUS has said that it's been working on addressing it via its updates, but we basically just have to all look at the community to see if more of these types of things pop up. So wrapping up, we're not going to recap every single section here in the conclusion. We're going to focus on more broad, wide, sweeping stuff. So if you've jumped here and you're looking for micro SD card or noise or thermal, any of that, you're going to have to go back for those specific things. Now, at launch, the Z1 Extreme was the most powerful mainstream handheld gaming PC, and there is always a market for most powerful thing in a category because you're not really fighting on value as much. Now the market is already shaping just a little over a month or 2 months later at this point, and GPD is shipping Win4 2023s, and Aya Neo has announced its Quint, which both of these devices will compete very directly with the Ally. Handhelds obviously need a mix of being cool, quiet, in really a more important way than, say, a laptop sometimes, and they run on tiny batteries, so battery life matters. In this way, being the most powerful thing is maybe not as important as it would be for a desktop GPU, because there's a lot more downsides to it. Now, it's possible to cap the Ally's refresh rate and its power draw, but at that point it starts to make sense to maybe buy a cheaper device that is built around those characteristics instead. And the Steam Deck is super competitive right now, because they just introduced the refurb program where you get them even cheaper if you're okay with something that's got maybe some wear and tear to it. At this point, the Ally Non-Extreme Z1 at $600, without having tested it, of course, we don't think is worth considering because there's simply too many alternatives. We can look at the on-paper specs versus, say, this one, the Ally, and the Steam Deck, and we could draw that conclusion without needing it in hand to do so, knowing everything we know about this device and its competitors. So the specs for the Non-Extreme are massively decreased, and it's beyond what a 14% discount really justifies. Now, this Ally is definitely still ahead of the Steam Deck specs-wise, but the deck competes based on value, not just horsepower. The cheapest deck is $400. It can be upgraded to double the Ally's storage capacity for maybe another $100. And $700 for an Asus handheld is impressively low, actually, given Asus's general value of its brand. But Valve's got a secret advantage, which is that it owns the damn store you're buying the games from, and it can and probably has sold hardware at a loss. On top of that, looking back at some of our gaming charts, the Ally's performance advantage becomes much smaller when running on battery power. If you want a handheld PC and intend to use it that way, not just plug it in, the deck is the better priced performance option, but the Ally has more headroom to scale that performance up. The Ally does have one at least clear advantage to us, which is the quality of the screen. Regardless of what you think, the refresh rate, 120 Hz, whether it's useful or not, the actual image quality you get is better, we think, on the Ally than on the deck. If that matters to you, maybe that swings it the other way. But for now, that's it for the testing of this device, and we hope you enjoyed the review. It was a massive amount of work, and we really enjoyed working on it, so we're looking forward to doing more of these. We will get these a little bit shorter as we continue to iterate on the process, but for now, this gives you at least the sort of foundation for what we have coming up. The GPD Win 4 is likely to be the next one. You didn't catch on, but we've got some others we're looking at too. Thanks for watching, and please support us if you like this content and or found it useful, because we need your help to be able to continue paying for the extremely long production times on stuff like this. You can go to store.gamersnexus.net if you want to grab a useful item like one of our soldering or project mats, our mod mats, our shirts if you want something simpler, and our toolkits are there as well. Subscribe for more. Thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.
Today's video is brought to you by Green Man Gaming, your source for awesome PC game deals. Save on AAA games and classic indie titles with discounts over 90% in some cases. More details after the video.
Nathaniel comes in with a question about high frame rate gaming, and he wants to know
whether he should wait for AM5 or do AM5 or wait for Aeroline. High FPS gaming, currently 13700K on a 7900 XTX.
That's okay, honey. Words to be hard.
They can be.
So, Nathaniel, I appreciate the question. I appreciate the support. Let's take a step back and think about something for a minute. You are currently on the second best CPU Intel has to offer. The 13900K being the best, the 13700K being really, really close. And if you're just gaming, they're basically the same thing. The 13900K being if you're content creating, live streaming, multitasking, you have 3 monitors. I would buy the i9 for those, but for most people, the 13600K is fine. Heck, the 13600K is fine for most people. AM5 currently consists of Zen 4. Zen 5 will not be up till next year. And he asked about Arrow Lake. Arrow Lake, it's not Arrow Lake, it's Arrow Lake. I think I said Arrow Lake. It's ARROW, as in the bow and arrow. Arrow Lake is coming probably October 2024, about 15 months from now we're recording this. The Zen 5 chips on AM5 are also coming about 15 months from now. That's what we're expecting. None of that's confirmed. Right. Zen 5 should be 20 to 30% faster than Zen 4.
Should be AM6.
No,
No, it's going to be
it's going to be an AM5. Unlike Intel, AMD keeps their sockets for more than 5 minutes. So, AM5 with Zen 4, you know, you're not alone in this. The whole AM4, Zen 3, AM5, Zen 4, but then Zen 5, and then it'll be Zen 6 on AM5, and then Zen 7 on AM6. I've gone cross-eyed. I need the button from Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me, where they're talking about time travel. But wait, if I went back to 1967 to stop Dr. Evil, and I was frozen in 1969, and Austin Powers turns to the camera and goes, "Oh no, I've gone cross-eyed." Look, I like AMD, but that is confusing as can be. If you were to replace your 13700 with a Zen, you would see a decrease in FPS in most games. Now, before all the keyboard warriors rush to their comment section to say, "But Tech, don't you know the Ryzen 7 7800X 3D is the fastest gaming CPU in the world? I saw a benchmark over on this other tech YouTuber site." Yes. Yes, it is. The Ryzen 7 7800X 3D is the fastest gaming CPU in the world. If you are running benchmarks on clean test benches at 1080p, high detail, and an RTX 4090. You are not. Neither is anybody else. Those benchmarks don't mean what everybody thinks they mean. We have tested this. We have tested this at 1080p. We actually used a 3090 Ti. And yes, the 3D chips from AMD at 1080p using a 3090 Ti beat Intel's chips. Then we replaced the 3090 Ti with an RX 6700 XT, went to 1440p high detail, and they do not. In fact, they're often slower than not only Intel's chips, but slower than AMD's non-3D chips. And the reason for that is because AMD's 3D chips have a lower base clock speed than their non-3D chips. That matters more than minute the GPU's location. So, now to be fair, Nathaniel has a 7900 XTX. That's way faster than the 6700 XT, but it is not as fast as a 4090. It is undoubtedly, he didn't say, I'm just going to assume he's not playing at 1080p, but he's buying a $1,000 video card to play at 1080p is ridiculous. No, come on.
I mean, competitive gaming requires high FPS, but there's only a couple of reasons why you want to use high FPS gaming.
Yeah, at 1440p. As far as I'm concerned, 1080p is over. You have that hardware, For the 3 people on Earth playing at 1080p using $1,000 video cards and $400 CPUs, please stop. Unless you are a professional esports player playing in tournaments with cash prizes, broadcasts. I mean, okay, if you're a member of the Overwatch League and you're getting paid to play games,
then that's a different.
But you know what? They're not paying for the hardware anyway.
No, that's true.
They don't get all sponsored, provided everything.
Yep.
If you're buying your own hardware, 240 hertz, 1440p monitors are not that expensive. There's no need to be at 1080p.
40.
Did he just? Yeah. Okay. So the 3D chips are a waste of your time. They're nice, but again, clean test benches.
Yeah.
Real world scenarios.
And he doesn't say what
they aren't as great as everybody thinks they are. They're nice. I don't knock them.
So being on 13th gen, you think he should skip 14 and 15 and head to 16? Or do you think he should skip 14 and head to 15?
15 would probably... Arrow Lake is going to be a waste of your money as well. It'll be faster, but it's not likely to be faster by enough to really matter. Think of it this way. How much money are you willing to spend? This is a generic question to everybody watching. How much money are you willing, even if you have a lot of budget? There's so many things to spend money on in life. If you were to replace an i7 13700K with an i7 15700K October of 2024, 15 months from now, he will need a new motherboard because it's on LGA 1851. He might or might not need new RAM because it'll be DDR5. If he has DDR5 now, he didn't say it's fine. If he's on DDR4, he'll need DDR5. He might need more RAM or faster RAM.
Got some materials for us. Got a replicator
He
coming down.
will at least need a cooler adapter that keeps his cooler, because they have not changed the whole position, but they have changed the pressure requirements, and so coolers will need adapters for LGA. He's going to spend 4, 6, 7. He might spend $800. And what he'll get is a CPU with the same core counts that he has now, and give or take 20% more performance. But with a 7900 XTX at 1440p, that's not going to translate into 20% more frames. Are you okay to spend $800 to go from 150 frames per second to 170 frames per second? I mean, you do you, man. That's
What he might, and you didn't tell us what he's expecting and a budget. So.
He should skip 15th at the least. 16th gen is Lunar Lake, and that will be in 2025. So that'll be an upgrade from 2022 because his 13700K is a 2022 chip. Upgrade every 3 years. Upgrading every 2 years is a waste of money. Right, and that will be 16th gen Lunar Lake. And that will be the last chip of LGA 1851, or at least that's what we believe. Because Beast Lake in 2026 will be a new socket.
Correct.
Thanks, Intel. So that'll be a new socket. And that way he can buy the best available chip on the socket. And at that point, please buy the M9. I need to buy whatever the best is when it launches.
Battery low.
And that way
Charging
he doesn't
battery.
deal with a midterm upgrade. Or you wait to see what Zen 5 does next year on AM5. I don't know. We've heard rumors. We don't know. So if Zen 5 is interesting, maybe you move to it because you think I'd rather be on a more future-proof platform because I'll go to Zen 6 because it's dropping CPU upgrade.
Will also depend on his games. There's some games like
Intel, some like
and
AMD.
some like AMD, some like Nvidia. Do you know what I mean? So it just depends on the game. But some are more CPU dependent, GPU dependent. That's very tricky to answer right now because we don't have all the information.
And he should reevaluate when it comes to 2025 with Lunar Lake. Because it's entirely possible at that point in time that we'll start to get leaks and information on Beast Lake in 2026.
Yeah.
Beast Lake is supposed to have a big upgrade in core counts and a big upgrade in IPC. Both the P cores are being redone with the new microarchitecture, and the E cores are being redone for Beast Lake. Maybe stretch it another year. Now this is altered if his 7900 XTX is good enough that he decides to buy the next gen video card. Maybe then he should do a CPU upgrade. I mean, you can throw so much money.
It's a luxury having a computer and gaming on it.
I like to encourage people to make upgrades where the difference is a wow moment. And nothing next year is going to wow you.
So you can get some value out of it.
And it might take till Beast Lake to wow you. Even Lunar Lake in 2025 may sort of be a... I mean, I went from a 2018 CPU to a 2022 CPU 4 years. I noticed it, but I wasn't wowed. Going from an i9 9900K to a Ryzen 9 7950X was a nice upgrade. I can see the difference. I can tell I can do more with it. It's faster. It's smoother. I could have kept it or left it. It didn't make me go, no, that's an upgrade.
Hang on, I'm crafting.
So, what do you want to add to this?
What I would add is try and give us a little more information when you're putting in questions so that we can...
Resolution, games played, frame rate expected.
Budget.
Because I'm assuming about 144 frames per second. If he wants 300 frames per
That's
second,
different kettle of fish.
um,
That's a whole different conversation.
then he should have 49.
You know, high FPS can mean quite a few different things to different people. So yeah, just a little more specifics. But I think you've nailed it. He just needs to wait to see what is actually going to be available.
He's got a great CPU. Enjoy your computer, man. You don't have to upgrade because new shiny stuff came out. Just because something new's coming, just enjoy your machine, man. You got a great computer.
Greenman Gaming is a game seller that offers publisher-sourced game keys at incredible prices. This is not a key reselling site. Everything here is 100% direct from the publishers. Greenman Gaming has been in business for 10 years selling discounted game keys, famous for their publisher sales, where almost everything from a specific publisher is on sale at once. Greenman Gaming offers deep discounts on older games as well as fair discounts on brand new ones, sometimes as much as 25% off pre-orders. Now you may be wondering, how do they do this when the same game is full price on Steam? Simple. They are passing on part of their cut to you as the customer. It is typical for 70% of the purchase price to go to the publisher and 30% to go to the retailer. So Greenman Gaming offers a 22% discount on a brand new game. That's basically them passing their cut over to you. For new release games, AAA games, and major publisher titles, Greenman Gaming has been our very own primary source for games in the past few years, and we recommend them for your own game library as well.
Recharging shields.
Hi, welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason.
Behind you.
GPU prices update for September 2023, and oh my goodness, the GPU market has gone totally bonkers. We've got not one, but two new GPU launches, and gamers, spoiler alert, seem super excited, at least about one of them. We've got NVIDIA cutting prices on RTX 4000 series cards, and is up to the best GPU for September 2023 for 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. Remember, if you get value out of the video, give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel, and of course, subscribe. Click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by Deepcool and their new CH560 digital PC case. With a customizable digital readout for your CPU and GPU, the CH560 is a sleek, airflow-focused design. It offers maximum cooling capacity with 4 pre-installed ARGB fans and up to a 360mm top-mounted radiator. With compatibility up to eATX motherboards and GPUs up to 360mm, this case has it all. If you want premium cooling and maximum compatibility in a sleek design with a digital readout, check out the CH560 today using the links in the video description. Before we jump into GPU pricing, I just wanted to welcome you to a brand new studio. That's right to say brand new studio. We moved halfway across the United States, and I'd love to tell you that we have the studio finished, we're like 3/4 finished right now. Got to get a video because the GPU market's going totally insane. But if you want a full tour of the studio, become a channel member. The day after this video goes live, we're going to do a full live stream build right here in the studio, so check it out. All right, let's start with AMD Radeon GPU pricing because we got 2 new GPUs. We'll both talk about the pricing now, and then we'll talk about later in the video in the news section. Did they sell out? Did they not sell out? What do I think about the price to performance of both those graphics cards? We also had Starfield just launched. And it's bundled with AMD Radeon GPUs. So as a result of that, you've seen a number of prices go up on some of these Radeon GPUs, although there are some interesting price cuts as well. That's both the result of people buying AMD Radeon GPUs to get the Starfield bundle, but also AMD or the board partners have raised the prices of some of the cards, especially the ones at the bottom. They've raised them up 20 or 30 bucks at times, clear that they want to take a little bit of profit while the getting is good. Just remember that Starfield bundle, at least at the time of filming, unless AMD extends it, is going to, the deal is going to run out in September, then you'll have until the end of October to redeem.
Today's video is
Who dropped me here like a douche?
Hello everyone, this is your daily dose of internet. Someone forgot to close the luggage door properly on this plane. Bags started falling out, and they had to make an emergency landing. Poor little guy had no idea what was coming.
Oh, you got one. Yeah. Got two. Okay. Oh, anything you can do this one?
Oh, good, buddy. Oh! Wow.
This person chose the wrong object to use as a substitute.
Today's a good day to
He thought for sure that her phone was waterproof.
It's waterproof!
This company makes incredibly fast snowmobiles that are built for racing.
This is your champion.
A few days ago, a prisoner had a unique method of escaping from a prison in Pennsylvania. The method worked because the prisoner is still on the loose.
Enough lambing around. Let's explore that together.
Hey, you almost done?
This poor cat got a brain freeze.
Oh! Oh, get it, Fluff. Get it, get it. No, the elevator. Oh, the elevator. Hey, I think your shoes are on the wrong feet.
We're not all in the ring. Check your positions.
That is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys again very, very soon. Bye.
I received 0 contributions.
Man, that was kind of dog shit loot. Usually it's good.
Congratulations.
What the fuck are you talking about? You suck.
We're still gonna do this damn Starfield. What the hell? Or is this a review?
I don't even want to hear it.
This is my formal apology. I just saw an opportunity and I took it. I'm sorry. I learned my lesson.
Is this the roaster venue?
Shut up. Also, I'm in cosplay today, but it's nothing crazy. I watched some of the One Piece live action thing, and I just was like, I can do that. I have this stuff, so I just dug through my closet. What's this? Bro! What the heck? No, it's supposed to be Nami. It's supposed to be Nami. This is what it's supposed to be. Wendy's looking ass. Oh my god. You look like Vicky from Fairly Odd Parents, bro. People are just saying everything but Nami.
Yeah.
Everything.
Went through Ben 10.
No! This is so dumb.
Impossible looking at.
No!
The two Blossom from Powerpuff Girls.
No! Oh my god.
A nice Kansas cosplay from Phineas Big 4. I'm sorry, Emmy, but this Misty cosplay is an accurate wrong colour shirt, but the chompy cosplayed Snorlax blocking your way is a 10/10.
Stop! Don't be rude to Chompy. He's not that fat.
This is a cool Snorlax. A nice Kansas cosplay from Phineas Big 4. I'm sorry, Emmy, but this Misty cosplay is an accurate wrong colour shirt, but the chompy cosplayed Snorlax blocking your way is a 10/10.
Stop! Don't be to Chompy. He's not that bad.
This is a cool Daphne from Scooby-Doo cosplay.
Oh,
Frankie, we need you back in Foster's home.
Ain't no way my Star Guardian misfortune is throwing my game plan.
Oh my god. I was thinking about starting to cosplay on stream more again, but I feel like every time I do it, I'm just gonna get mischaracterized the whole story.
Mrs. Flintstone looking ass.
No!
I cannot remember which quintessential quintuplets that is.
You guys are just googling orange hair characters now.
It looks like Ginny Weasley. Oh, look, it's Master Splinter and April. Where's the turtles?
Oh my god!
Shit, where's it?
No fucking way, bro.
You should be used to this by now. You are, after all, in the business of misery love.
Someone else got it?
Yeah, that's actually true. It's fun in a bit way, right? Oh, I'm in the business of misery. I hate you guys. I hate you guys. I hate you guys.
Jen the Bent Carrot Top looking ass. Liam from Fifth Element. When did I do Great Kai Senate cosplay.
Where the fuck is this boy shit?
This Inferno
It was in the
maybe
back,
Titan
yeah,
6.
outside.
Henry Garfield cosplay soon. It's no way. It's Frankie Foster. Why is she talking to her imaginary friends? Hey, have you had any luck finding those ghosts? Can I get you a boneless pizza with a 2-liter Coke? Nice pain cosplay. Did you go from One Piece? Emmy, your viewers kinda suck. Sasuna. Hi, Mila. You were so good on the Fifth Element. Great acting. Let's just see you on Twitch.
I'm looking
When
for a
is the
set
next
going for a
Resident
lot,
Evil
but other than
coming
that, I'm
out?
pretty good.
Come back, Cameroon.
Okay.
Dilute gender bend. Are you cosplaying Blanca from Street Fighter? Call me, beat me if you want to reach me, it's Kim Possible. Emmy, I am loving the Ichigo Kurosaki from the Hood Anime Bleach. And this new Odyssey Jinx all goes crazy. Tomorrow, I love you tomorrow. Hey Vienna, the last time I saw you was on This Is TikTok. Lil Pup thought we wouldn't notice the Vicky from Fair cosplay. Wow, look at that Squirtle cosplay. Very nice. Ice Spice Bodoo. Yo, it's Gwen from Ben 10. Chucky Finster looking a little different. He'll get back into the sea.
I'm standing
I
right
really
now.
believe you are looking cute AF today. Bob the Tomato from VeggieTales looking ass.
You guys are colorblind. Holy shit.
Happy turn the TTS on Cat. You literally asked for this cat complain now, Cat.
Nobody asked for the TTS. It was Valkyrie had our TTS on her stream.
Where is your grandpa, Matheson Ben?
This is fine. It'll end eventually. I like TTS, honestly.
Nice Yahika cosplay. I love Naruto as well. It is the Sandy from Hard Knock Life.
Anyway, so, Keo
Are you
Walks,
Anna from Frozen?
guys.
No. What about Amaranth? No. What about Tiger from Winnie the Pooh? Or what about female Chase from One Piece?
What? It's not me! It's not me!
Are you going to meet up with Peter Parker after this? Rice Spice.
Rice Spice. No. Rice, Spice, are you kidding me?
When are we putting on the green face paint to complete the Princess Fiona cosplay? Nice Mrs. Pittsburgh.
I don't know where they went. There was somebody
Start
here.
from Finding Nemo cosplay.
You know, shut up so I can open some
All I got is that Sam from Totally Spies. Tommy Pickles really let himself get got down.
So, I have all the PO Box stuff from like the last...
Never actually
Tell me what you want, what you really, really
you
want.
see in like 10 seconds.
Eliza Thornberry. You're my favorite character, Richie.
Kind of why people don't like this
Please,
map.
Allie,
and
please,
Rome.
I'm sorry for trying to mess with
Nigel
Rage
Thornberry
Stream.
will be next.
I just saw an opportunity and I took it.
really?
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I learned my lesson. I'm sorry.
Hello, red-haired girl from the Lord. Give us the trees back.
Well, my tip to new players, because I coach a lot of my friends, is like, don't rat, basically.
I'm
You're always
sorry.
gonna get better.
Give us the trees back.
What you gotta
No.
do.
Hello, Wendy.
People
I'd like
really
to order
want
one
to try
baconator
hide
and a chocolate.
Please, Allie, please. She's like, bye.
I would
Terry Emery is an American Twitch streamer and cosplayer. She is mainly known for streaming League of Legends and her cosplays on her channel.
Well, I can't even do rank until
On
I
the
get to
Space
level,
Sticks Pumpkin
like I
Head
think it's like
cosplay.
level 50 or something. I'm like, well, outside of work and like whenever I get there, right?
Right, yeah, that makes sense. Well, I mean,
Is
like I
this
said,
the roast of anything?
I'm trying to open my PO Box stuff.
How far away are the
You gotta
stars?
switch flop from here.
Apparently,
Nearly from One Piece.
I
Oh,
set
wait.
up TV pretty well with this bubble.
The anything real.
32.
I'm literally spamming skip. It's backed up 5 minutes.
It's giving annoying, alright.
I did not hear
I
that
can't do it anymore.
Cynthia from Rugrats looking on.
Yeah.
Do it anymore.
Only beat me if you want to reach me, Kim Impossible looking ass. Finally a Garfield cosplay.
Stop.
Hi Emily, loving the casual Black Widow cosplay.
No!
God damn it.
A Netflix adaptation that I
Tom
like.
Brave,
I
Emily.
think I'll do a cosplay with some stuff in my closet, and this is what happens.
You're gay. I see you are cosplaying Snuffy's orange jacket. Very nice, Snuff Bob.
Yeah, we have hope. We have a lot
Looking
of
like Candace Flynn there. Is that Alex from Minecraft squarehead looking ass?
Stop!
Yeah, I'm not coming out for that now.
Yeah, but you can craft the banners.
Emily from live action One Piece.
Or so inclined, or you can go run.
Okay, this is
Hey,
my
but did you still use water-type
You don't need to
Pokemon?
get the banner.
this is my formal apology. I'm sorry that when I found out that Valkyrie forgot to turn on,
Dollar Tree
forgot to
Gen
delete my TTS scene. I asked Allie to turn on
Oh, I think
channel
that's
point
fine.
TTS. I'm very sorry and I
Oh,
won't
no,
do it again. Is it over?
Man, this is a Wendy's.
Stop!
Wow, nice take on cosplay, Emily.
They're the same people! I literally can't open stuff over
Taylor's wears
Yeah,
Peter
with
Griffin
the,
act.
the gold knockdown shield, her reses are just so good.
I loved your acting in the One Piece live action.
Finally, another correct one.
Gang Fiona, I thought Shrek already saved you from the dungeon. Hey Emmy, nice Mara cosplay, but I think Amber Heard did it better. Emmy, do you know when you've been tangled?
There's a
I mean, you're gonna come back. You're gonna be in the storm already. This is fucked.
No, this is just my big freckle that my mom thought was cancer when I was a kid.
Hey Emmy, just watched the new Netflix One Piece adaptation with Nanny. Anyway, who are you cosplaying today?
I give up.
Are you Ricky from Tearing Your Parents? Pretty long, stopping looking ass. I didn't know Emmy knew about Yu Yu Hakusho. Didn't know you could pull off a Kazuma. Isn't that show older than you? Asuka gets in the diva. Is this why you only cosplay furries?
I'm just gonna ignore it. I'm sick of this. I've been waiting for like 15 minutes. Okay. This is the first PO Box thing. Shut up!
Hi, welcome back to PC Building. I'm Jason. This is our monthly GPU prices update for September 2023. And oh my goodness, the GPU market has gone totally bonkers. We've got not one, but two new GPU launches. And gamers, spoiler alert, seem like super excited, at least about. We've got NVIDIA cutting prices on RTX 4000 series cards and is running through the best GPU for September 2023 for 1080p, 1440p, and 4K. Remember, if you get value out of the video, give it a like. It makes a huge difference to the channel. And of course, subscribe. Click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. This video is sponsored by Deepcool and their new CH560 digital PC.
Oh, it's 10 stops away, bro.
For your CPU and GPU, the CH560 is a sleek, airflow-focused design.
2 stops away, though.
With 4 installed ARC fans and with 360mm top-mounted radiator. With compatibility up to eATX motherboards and GPUs up to 360mm. This case has it all. If you want premium cooling and maximum compatibility in a sleek design,
I gotta be the last one.
Check out the
We're gonna rip everything out of this bitch.
In the video description.
We're gonna say goodbye. This is the last stream with the 2080.
Brand new studio. We
love it.
Halfway across the United States, and I love to tell you that we have the studio finished. We're like 3/4 finished right now. You got to get a result of that. You've seen a number of prices go up on some of these Radeon GPUs, although there are some interesting people buying AMD Radeon GPUs to get the Starfield bundle, but also AMD or the board partners have raised the prices of some of the cards, especially the ones at the bottom. They've raised them up 20 or 30 bucks at times. Clear that they want to take a little bit of profit. All they're getting is good. Just remember that Starfield bundle, at least at the time of filming, unless AMD extends it, is going to, the deal is going to run out in September, then you'll have until the end of October to redeem your code and get the Starfield game. Starting off from 7900 XTX, yeah, look at that. They're basically raising the price on the kind of bottom level model up to $939. Right, good model. It's a Sapphire Pulse 7900 XTX with the promo code. Gets you down to $939. I saw about the best price performance GPUs at 1080p. And then the 7900 XT, this is a GPU that they're definitely trying to squeeze you on right now. $749 is a pretty flat price, and it's a pretty good price for the performance, but they come up on the base models that have been selling just $779 right now. In fact, you can't even find any of those cheaper models on Newegg. I think it's $799. You got to go over to Amazon right now to get any XFX feature work. Obviously, we've got the 7800 XT just launched. We'll go through that in just a moment in terms of did it sell out, did it not sell out? $499. But look at the 6800 XT. They've cut the price on almost all of these cards to below $500, except for kind of some straggler models that probably they've just forgotten about. But you can get one right now for $484. That's a pretty huge price cut from where it was just last month at $520. So it's come down about 40 bucks on it. And then we look at the 7700 XT coming at $449. As compared to the 6800, which is, we'll see later, that's about where it's
okay, sir.
4+ gigs of VRAM. And the interesting thing here is that 6800.
I was looking at a website comparing some GPUs.
We'll get more VRAM and some
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure why would people buy the 7700 XT. Going through the rest of these with the 6950 XT, I think is on its way out, just like we saw with the 3090 and 3080. The final few models are just kind of crazy listings right now. 629 still not a terrible price for it, but if you want one of those GPUs, go ahead and pick it up because I think they're going to go away permanently.
Oh, look, it's me, I'm here.
RX 7600. Look at that huge price cut. 10% price cut on the 7600 right now. You can get a couple of these different models for $229 or $239 right now if you want the Power Color Hellhound Radeon one with the nice RGB to it. So this is probably where this GPU always needed to be. It is nice to see it continue to fall in price because it's only got 8 gigs of VRAM. Honestly, in my estimation, if you're going to replace the 6600, that's selling for $199 right now. I'm not sure why the 7600 sells for much more than that. The rest of the market, look, 6700 to 6750 XT continues to bounce.
You got enemies already?
$330 to $320 price point. As is the 6700, bounce around that $270 price point. Otherwise, the rest of the market is pretty much stable. Before we jump into NVIDIA GPU pricing, let's look at Intel GPU pricing, and Intel's totally on a roller coaster right now. I don't understand what they're thinking over there. One month they're cutting prices to something that looks absolutely amazing. The next month the prices go right back up. and they're not competitive at all. Intel, you got to buy market share. What are you doing over there? Let's start with the A770. We'll only look at the 16 gig model because the A750 and A770, the performance differences, at least the ones I've seen, are so small. You're really just buying that card for the DRAM. So looking at the 16 gig version, $329 up from $299 again. I just don't understand why that card needed to go up $30. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Intel, help yourself out here. And then on A750, relatively competitive at $199. Although again, no Starfield bundle. I guess these will be competitive for people who don't want to play Starfield. Right back to $219 right now over at Amazon. All right, jumping over to NVIDIA GPU prices in September 2023, and we don't see a lot of change, except for one very, very significant change, basically, which is the RTX 4060 Ti, 16 gigabyte. They have cut the price on that card by $50, and it appears to be kind of an official price cut without being an MSRP adjustment. We know that in 2023, companies never adjust MSRPs anymore. They basically use retail back channels through their board partners, through their retail partners, in order to kind of reprice out those. So, 4060 Ti, a number of the models have come down to $449. We're not just talking the cheaper kind of board partners like Zotac. This is ASUS Dual right there for $449. I would say it looks like a number of these models have sold through, like the Gigabyte WindForce sold through. That's actually really good cooler on that card. MSI Ventus at $479 sold through for the 3-fan card. And then the Ventus 2-fan card has sold out $449. I don't think that's remember, we look at this so it's still a trickle come in, but seems to have at least a couple of buyers to clear out some of the stock that they already have. We'll have to see if NVIDIA continues to manufacture this GPU in any kind of numbers or not. But it was interesting that the price cut came, of course, days before the 7700 XT and 7800 XT launch. Yay, competition. Competition is good for the marketplace. It's also nice to see that NVIDIA has not completely abandoned gaming GPUs. Maybe Jensen, you know, he's a founder CEO. Maybe he just got too much of an ego state to let that go completely while they shift almost everything else to AI right now. So that's overall good to see. Honestly, for the rest of these GPUs, not much change in the market. Little fluctuation on the 4070 Ti with the 779 model going back up to 789. The RTX 3060 8GB continues to fall in price down to $237. Remember, that's not a 3060 12 gig. It's not the same card. It's more like a 3050 Ti. 3050, by the way, continues to fluctuate around $220, back down to $219. GPUs still overpriced. We'll go through the best price performance GPUs in just a moment. All right, let's jump into the news. And RX 7700 XT, 7800 XT launched on September 6th. That's right, the same day that Starfield came out, the official release of Starfield, not the pre-release. Don't know why they didn't do it with the pre-release. That may make a little bit more sense. But $449 for the 7700 XT and $499 for the 7800 XT, as we've already gone over. What was the reception? It's basically a tale of two GPU launches. That's right, I'm going to go Charles Dickens on you here. A tale of two GPU launches. On the one hand, the 7800 XT, look at that. They have all sold out. You can still back order 3 cards, but you're back ordering the cards. They are not currently available at retail. And all of these models, and I was tracking this, they all had stock during the launch. They have all completely sold out. And we know through other leaks and other sources that there was a pretty good volume on launching. So AMD, you did it. You did the thing that's only happened, this is the 3rd time basically in this generation that you sold out a GPU launch. The other launches to sell out, RTX 4090 launched, and that one sold out for quite a while too. And then the RX 7900 XTX sold out back in December, all the way really for about a month and a half. So look at that. What this is showing to me is that gamers do want value. As soon as you put value in front of them, we'll go over the performance in just a moment. It's a little spoiler alert here. But once you put performance and value in front of them at this price point, they're going to pull the trigger. They want to buy cards. They just don't want to buy garbage cards that have been shoved down our throats. And speaking of that, let's look at the 7700 XT. And it's a totally different story. Not a single one of these GPUs has sold out. Let that sink in for a second. How is it you had one GPU completely sell out, and then the other GPU, everyone's like, nah, I don't think so. It's because it's not priced appropriately. Again, there's not a value proposition here. That's what people are saying. That's what consumers are saying. And I just don't understand how the companies can't get it in their heads that this is what needs to happen. You will sell more graphics cards. Maybe they don't want to sell more graphics cards. I don't know. I'm not part of their business unit. I'm not out flying the wall in their meetings. I'm just a consumer like you are out there, just scratching my head when I see these launches that don't make any sense. They did the same thing with the 7900 XTX and XT. The XT was terribly priced at the time. Then they cut the XT price down to $750 eventually, and it sells because it's a good value. I expect the same thing to happen with the 7700 XT. Don't be surprised when you see that go to $399 and $379, possibly even $349 at some point, maybe in about 5 or 6 months. But $449, clearly not a good price. But what about performance? Well, basically, look at this on hardware. I'm also looking at hardware and box data. In terms of last ride performance, they both kind of share the same thing. 7800 XT, slightly faster than 1600 XT, and about 7% faster than the 4070. Last ride's performance, we'll get to ray tracing in just a second. 7700 XT, on the other hand, it's basically an RX 6800 with 4 gigs less VRAM and a little bit more expensive. So I don't really understand that. But they all crushed the 4060 Ti. Crushed the 4060 Ti, 16 gigabyte version, 8 gigabyte version. It really doesn't matter. In NVIDIA, that was really the
Just out for delivery.
4060, we all know that. Trying to pull a fast one on us like this. That should have been the 4060. The 4070 should have been the 4060 Ti. We know that you basically slotted everything down. We're not happy about it. AMD did the same thing to us with the 7800 XT. Probably should have just been the 7800, not the 7800 XT. But all of that aside, that's where the performance shakes out in terms of rasterized performance. Interestingly enough, when we look at ray tracing, the performance is kind of all over the place. If you look at the suite of games, and I think this is really suite of game dependent, Tom's hardware shows the 4070 about 20% faster than the 7800 XT. Raster in terms of ray tracing, and that's typically what you'd expect from NVIDIA, or what we've come to expect in terms of the difference. Now, I know only about 20% of you out there care about ray tracing, so we won't spend that much time on it. But interestingly enough, when we look at hardware on Box's number, another 6-game average, I think there's only one title that they have in common here. Actually, the RX 7800 XT is only 10% behind the RTX 4070 in ray tracing. Wow, that's pretty amazing. That is pretty amazing. It's kind of shocking to me that that's where they've come. It looks like they've made a number of driver updates to various games. AMD is closing the gap on ray tracing. Of course, a lot of people would say, well, Jason, I don't want to get 69 FPS at 1440p. I want 100 and something FPS, so I turn ray tracing off. I know that's what about 80% of you are, so you can make your own determination in terms of how important this is. But it's definitely an area where AMD does appear to be closing the gap. So what's my verdict on these GPUs? Well, let's start off with the positive. Number one, they both come with Starfield, so that's like a premium edition. $100 value, so you're not going to have to buy that game. If you don't care about that game, that's one thing, but clearly from the launch of that game, a lot of people do care about it, so that's a big, big benefit right now. And let's start off with the good one. Let's start with the RX 7800 XT. $499. That is a great launch. Let me tell you why. People are like, Jason, it's the same price as, just about the same price 6800 XT. It's got the same performance. How can it be better? Remember, the 6800 XT launched at $650. $650. So we have pulled this level of performance down to $500. And even recently, that 6800 XT, yes, there was maybe one model at $499, but the vast majority were like $540, $550. So we're getting an overall pretty steep price cut. We're getting some additional features, and in terms of the overall value proposition this generation versus last generation, it does have a benefit. I also will say, well, it's not the greatest launch ever, of course. It's not the 1080 Ti reborn, don't get me wrong. While it's not the GPU launch that maybe we deserve, it is the GPU launch that PC gaming needed right now after that horrible spin that we've gone through with the scalpers and GPU miners buying up all the cards, GPU prices going crazy. This is the step that we need to go in the right direction. In terms of the 7700 XT, don't buy it. Just don't buy it. And AMD will take it before we do. $449. This is a good card at a bad price. It's a good card at a bad price, and we know AMD that we can lean on them. So just don't buy this card until it comes down to $399, $379, possibly $349, because you know it's going there. Don't buy it. And rejoice that 7800 XT might portend new chapter in GPU launches where these companies aren't trying to constantly rip us off for every last nickel, and we can kind of meet together in the middle at a much better value. I want to cover one more thing just very quickly, and that is something that I was worried about in a recent Q&A, which is that with NVIDIA rapidly going after AI, that they might start cutting back product development on the gaming side. Hardware Times is saying that they have allegedly cut back their budget for their driver team. So when you see day one drivers like their terrible drivers for Starfield and how low NVIDIA's performance in that game was, obviously a lot of tech companies struggle with when you suddenly have, hey, this is a huge opportunity for us over here. The amount that they could make on AI absolutely dwarfs anything they could even hope to make on gaming. So I just wanted to put that out there, have people consider that, especially right now as you're considering what kind of GPU to buy. Let's jump into the best GPU for gaming 2023 in September. If you're not familiar with how we do this, we basically take all the GPUs out there at 8 gigs or more VRAM. We don't recommend less than that. We take their performance versus an RX 570, and then we take their price, either used or new. We do prefer new cards unless there's a 30% or more discount. And then we get a price to performance. And then we divide them up. Best card for 200, best card for 1440p, 4K, and so on. Remember, this is linked down in the video description. You can jump in the spreadsheet yourself. These are US-based numbers. Go ahead and feel free to put your own numbers in here instead. Jumping in the best GPU under $200 in September 2023. And listen, not a lot of changes, but some important ones. If you only got about $100 to spend, start off with the RX 570 8GB model. Don't get the 4GB, they're the same price. Get the 8GB model, $53. That'll get you started in building a super budget gaming PC. And that would be my top pick. But if you have a little bit more to spend, you could pick up something like, especially at the $100 level, anything from a 1070 to a 1070 Ti, even a 1080. I know those cards are a little bit older. They're definitely about 6+ years old at this point. So you could also consider spending a little bit more for 123 on RX 5700 XT. It will absolutely destroy everything else in terms of performance underneath that price point. So consider that as well. That continues to come down in price. Moving up to closer to $200, I still like the GTX 1080 Ti, $168. I think it's come up a little bit in terms of the overall price from last month. Still remains a good card because 11 gigs of VRAM is hard to find at that price point. In fact, it's impossible. And then in terms of your new options here, you are limited. The Intel RX off the table, but the RX 6600, the thing that's also going to propel that is you get the standard edition of Starfield. That's a $69 value. So if you want Starfield, get the 6600. It doesn't have a ton of power for that game, but it's pretty good. You could also look at the 6650 XT if that's important to you. Let's jump to the best high FPS 1080p card. So this is where we've got at least 10 gigs of VRAM, at least 10 gigs of VRAM, so we can play all the titles at 1080p. And the GPU performance score is 180 or higher, and these cards cost less than $350. And honestly, not a ton of change, but some important ones again. We already talked about the 1080 Ti. I think that's a great card to pick up. I know it's old though. It's 6+ years old. The RX 6700 with 10 gigs of VRAM for about $270, $280, kind of bounces around those two price points. That's the one I target. That was our best Starfield build that I would look at because that's going to give you solid enough 1080p performance in Starfield. Yes, you're going to turn on the high settings, which also turn on FSR by default, but that's going to give you enough punch for that game. and 10 gigs of VRAM is going to give you a little bit more longevity. In terms of NVIDIA GPUs here, you get 3060 12 gig, 269. I continue to like that card. Although that 2080 Ti, I gotta tell you, it keeps coming down in price to the point where I'm like, maybe you should consider over the 3060, especially given the fact it's way more performant and only has 1 gig less of VRAM on it. Yeah, it does cost a little bit more. And then of course we got the 6700 XT, 6750 XT, which is just killer card. I mean, that is going to be, in terms of when we look back at this generation, this is going to be the star of the overall generation, 6700 XT. Let's jump into the best 1440p graphics card in September 2023. And wow, look at that. The 7800 XT and 7700 XT actually make the list. I think that was the first cards in this generation that on launch actually make the list, because this is just a top 10 list. The 4070 is not on this list. It's on this list somewhere. It's just further down than top 10. 4060 Ti, 16 gig is not on this list. There's a lot of cards not, 4070 Ti is not on this list. 7900 XT is not on this list. So there's a lot of cards not on this list. And that just means that there's other cards that are way better value. Let's start off with some of those values up there. RTX 3080 12 gig. Now we didn't go through the used pricing this month. We'll jump back into it next month. We just didn't have time for it. But the price on those 3080s, 12 gig and 10 gig has come down quite a bit since the previous month. So check those out if you're open to buying something used. And definitely if you want NVIDIA and you're open to buying something used. If instead you're looking for something a little cheaper, check out the 6700